Toni Morrison is known worldwide to be a Nobel Prize and Pulitzer Prize-winning novelist, editor, and professor. Through her many novels, she strives to bring light to disregarded issues in society, including white supremacy and internecine issues of the Black community involving skin tone discrimination. These concepts are shown throughout themes prevalent in her texts, such as prejudice within a group, intersectionality, and the struggles faced by women due to their femininity. She believes that shedding light on these topics will promote awareness and will allow outsiders to understand these problems with greater depth, aiding society to overcome these issues. First off, we're going to be addressing the question, why does Morrison write?
Growing up in a family of 6, Morrison credits her parents for instilling in her sense of love for reading, music, and folklore, along with a high sense of morale and perspective. Living in an integrated community of the 40s, Morrison was not exposed to racism until her later teens. During the 1960s, however, Morrison's writing career took an impressive leap. It was through this time that most of the works published by African-American male writers were highly revolutionary, aggressive fiction and nonfiction novels. They had a very positive, racially uplifting rhetoric to go with it. But they were only looking at the white versus black conflicts and not the internecine conflicts of the black race. They were going to completely skip over the fact that many African Americans experienced discrimination within their own community, and Morrison didn't want them to forget about the possibility of it ever happening. She was deeply concerned about the feelings and emotions of black people feeling that they were ugly because of their darker skin tone. She felt a grave need to focus on young black African American children because they never got the spotlight, and this way they would feel recognized by the world. She not only focused solely on this concept to confront tone discrimination, but she also strived to write her novels in a way that was relatable to her readers. She chose to do this by filling her novels with highly common character roles based off of modern society. Another issue she confronted through her books was the problem of white supremacy. People chose to criticize her books, asking her to write about the white race because they felt the real confrontation was between the black and the white community. However, Morrison felt that by doing so, people were asking her to privilege white people in her texts as if the black people's lives had no meaning without the white context presented for them. For this reason, Morrison makes sure that she doesn't write up the white race as the dominant one in any of her books. Morrison also makes it a point in her texts to emphasize that black is just a color. If someone takes too much importance to the surface beauty that they criticize about themselves, then this will destabilize them, and that's where Morrison believes that all of a person's success comes from. So in the end, every one of Morrison's novels strives to convey several of these concepts throughout their own storylines. Morrison tries to enlighten the world on issues she feels that do not receive enough of the spotlight in our times.
To really understand why Toni Morrison is an important author, we need to understand the message she's trying to send with her books. Each of her books brings its own nuances to literature. However, there are many common themes and messages within her books. One thing in common in her books is an underlying theme of racism, which is inherently not uncommon, but the way she talks about it is very unique. They often come from a very personal place and also like to highlight racial issues within a race, which is often overlooked. When she discusses racism, the character's race is not their only feature. Like in a lot of literature, this allows the reader from any background to sympathize. The main character is Bride. She's the daughter of a white man and a woman of color who has pretty light complexion. Despite these facts, Bride is extremely dark. This leads to her mother treating her poorly because she believes the world will, and she has to be ready for it. This outlines the idea of colorism. However, she faces racism, and despite it, is a successful businesswoman of a cosmetic company called You Girl. She also discusses her struggles as a woman in a relationship with her boyfriend Brooker. She ends up living a successful life, and by the end is soon to be a mother. In the book A Mercy, the main character is Florence, and she experiences racism throughout the book. However, her biggest struggle is her relationship. Her lover, Blacksmith, has a son from a previous relations, and Florence beats him. This causes huge issues within the relationship, and he calls her a slave and dumb. Her issue stems from a place of jealousy and emotion, but her race adds more complexities to it. In the book Beloved, Seth was a slave and she escaped. She had many children with her master and cared about those children deeply. Also, without a man to help raise her kids, her single motherhood affected many of her choices early on. She also was doubtful in her marriage after she ran away. She struggled because she was never in a relationship without a huge power struggle. This leads to much conflict. In the novel The Bluest Eye, we have the main character named Piccola. She is often called ugly and put down a lot by her family and even other African Americans, who even stop her more than her dark skin. She also experiences lots of physical and emotional abuse throughout her story. She's definitely at a disadvantage because of her skin, but her bigger issue is the internalization of it and coming from a low-income background.
So as Natty just explained, there were a few themes that we found that were prevalent in all of our books, and the use of these themes is one of the many things that made Morrison a unique writer, and something that was most definitely noticed by the Swedish Academy when awarding Morrison as the first African American woman to win a Nobel Peace Prize in Literature. And so each year when the Nobel Committee comes together to choose the next recipient in the prize in literature, there are many criteria in which they look at. So following the announcement of the winner in 1993, the Swedish Academy explained the criteria in which they followed and how Morrison met each different part of the criteria. So first we have innovation. The Nobel Committee explained that the way that Morrison regards the African presence in America is very contemporary. She sees blackness and whiteness as, quote, companions instead of clashing against each other, as a lot of writers focus on in their novels. And through this companionship that she sees, it creates a flowing together of the two races into a cohesive story. So secondly, we have relatability. Morrison is able to bring a great amount of empathy and compassion into her writing, which is felt by all readers, not just those that are African American. And this is a lot different than a lot of other African American writers because, as we explained earlier, Morrison has a way of making the characters three-dimensional, which in turn makes them relatable to all. And this was most definitely noticed by the Nobel Committee. This is appealing to the committee because it allows Morrison's books to have a large crowd that can relate to her work. Thirdly, we have consistency. As the Swedish Academy stated, her writing is, quote, consistent but variegated, just like the squares that are shown. They are similar, but each is unique in its own way. Similarly, Morrison has a distinguished way of writing, but each book brings with it its own unique spin on similar topics, making her writing very strong in the eyes of the Nobel Committee, because her writing is both distinctive and unique. So fourth, we have style. Morrison's literature encapsulates a style in which she jumps around in time and in turn creates, quote, motifs in space and time that add to her writing in a unique way and act as just another way to tie all of her novels together. Yet she addresses these jumps in time in different ways in each of her novels, making them each unique in their own way, yet still bringing them together. Lastly, we have the use of personal background. So as the Swedish Academy had stated, when she was young, her landlord set fire to their house when they couldn't pay rent. Instead of being angry, her family reacted with laughter, which taught Morrison that laughter is how, quote, you can distance yourself from the act and take your life back, take your integrity back. This personal experience had an effect on Morrison's writing by making her characters strong, while also showing that she herself is extremely strong, not only in her writing, but also in her character.
Like any other author, Toni Morrison has people who enjoy her work and those who do not. But throughout my research, it seems to me that everyone agrees that Morrison's tough, poetic writing style is unique. In an article written positively about Toni Morrison's work, Sasha Frost, an African-American actress and critic, describes Morrison as brilliantly capturing the woes of African-American people while articulating and condemning the socio-political discrimination that African Americans have undergone throughout history. Frost also discusses her love for Morrison's support of other African American writers. She describes a time when Morrison used one of her magazine interviews to talk about her friend Eudora Welty. She describes this as adding to her already unique, strong persona. This shows us that it's not solely the work of the author, but also the actions the author takes, especially after being recognized for doing something great. On the other hand, we have a woman by the name of D.J. Myers, a critic, blogger, and author. She challenges the Nobel Prize that Morrison received for one of her most popular books, Beloved. She right away describes Beloved as the most overrated novel ever. She then continues to say that when Beloved was initially up for the Nobel Prize and lost to Philip Roth's The Counterlife, it was well deserved. After Roth won to Morrison, 48 African American critics and writers wrote to the New York Times with concerns of the oversight and harmful whimsy by which white males were portrayed in Roth's book that was chosen over Beloved. 4 years later, Beloved received the Nobel Prize. Myers believes that the Academy was swayed by the protests and ignored the literature altogether in this case. Myers also thinks that the most of the lines in Beloved were taken almost directly out of the Christian Bible. Because of this, Myers considers Morrison's work to lack creativity and originality. Morrison's writing is focused on the zoomed-in struggles of African Americans and what they faced and have faced. Her writing illuminates the sometimes forgotten troubles African Americans experience every day, which has made African Americans like Frost feel like they have a voice in the world. Morrison never uses white people as her main characters. Frost says white Americans often challenge this, questioning how we will ever reduce racism in America if Morrison doesn't use white characters. In an interview, Morrison said, "The black narrative has always been understood to be a confrontation with some white people. I'm sure there are many of them. They're not terribly interesting to me. What is interesting to me is what is going on within the community. And within the community, there are no major white players. Once I thought, what is life like if they weren't there? Which is the way we lived it. The way I lived it." Overall, this conversation, full of brutal and honest examples of racism, is very important to today's race issues in America. Overall, Toni Morrison has used her incredible writing skills to give voice to African Americans. We hope her books continue to encourage and inspire future generations.